And we're back in the car on a Sunday, like we never left. Welcome to the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all for spending some of your Sunday afternoon of Memorial Day weekend here with me in New York. Well, once again, we're going to skip past all that promotional jazz and get right to the guts of the episode. Well, today is another boxing episode and one of my favorite boxing stories featuring my single favorite historical figure of all time. I'm wearing the Superman versus Muhammad Ali collector's comic cap, and I've got the "If you even dream of beating me, you better wake up and apologize" t-shirt, which Quentin Tarantino had a little fun with, kind of paraphrasing in the movie Reservoir Dogs in what amounts to a toxic masculinity contest between Harvey Keitel's Mr. White and Michael Madsen's Mr. Blonde, where Mr. Blonde keeps doing the old, well, it was before Clint Eastwood, but doing the old finger gun on Harvey Keitel, and Keitel laughs, not in a friendly way, but he goes, "You shoot me in a dream, you better wake up and apologize." But on this day, 60 years ago, May 25th, 1965, in Lewiston, Maine, it wasn't really like a hotbed of sports activity over there in Lewiston, Maine in 1965, or 2025 for that matter. But on this day, 1965, he was 23, the 23-year-old undisputed world heavyweight champion, now called Muhammad Ali. He had still been Cassius Clay, his birth name, Cassius Marcellus Clay Jr. That's who won the 1960 Olympics, the official record book. It could be confusing if all you know is, oh, Ali won in the Olympics. What year did he win? You're not going to find his name in the books unless there's some sort of a demarcation, as Cassius Clay. But it usually just lists Cassius Clay, 1960 light heavyweight Olympic gold. So the backstory with why it was such a strange night, why May 25th, 1965 even happened, because they were supposed to fight quite some time earlier. And you think about it this way. Young Cassius Clay, age 22, took Sonny Liston's title in what was mostly an easy fight, except for there was a moment at the end of the fourth round where some liniment or some caustic crap got into the kid's eyes, and he wanted to quit. And luckily for history, Angelo Dundee somehow managed to bully him into getting out there blind and all but screaming in pain in the fifth round until his eyes cleared a minute or so, and then he went back to kind of dominating the champ. But when you look at it, and this is the kind of thing that if it happened now, I guarantee you it would not have played out in the same fashion. So they fought for the title, and Cassius Clay, I think he was he 19-0 or 20-0? I don't know what his exact record was when he got in there with Sonny, but there were people who thought that he could at least give Sonny a fight because he had looked good in a lot of his earlier fights, and he had the pedigree of an Olympic champion who beat guys who were much more talented, well, not much more talented, but much more experienced than he was. And he really came through like the proverbial champ. He needed to win the third round in the gold medal match in 1960, and he did. He busted the guy's nose. Ziggy Petrikowski was bleeding all over the ring. But there were a couple of tough fights leading up to the title fight in 64. Doug Jones went 10 with Cassius Clay. There were some people who thought Doug won the fight. He didn't. The kid got better as the fight went on, would be how I would describe it. And then Henry Cooper nearly knocked him out of the ring in England in the fourth round. And then there was some shenanigans that went on in Clay's corner. Angelo Dundee kind of pulled on the glove so that there was a little bit of extra time because the glove was messed up. And then he went out there and he really got to Henry and busted him up. It was one of the worst cuts. It was a cut almost as bad, if not as bad, as the one which stopped the Lennox Lewis-Vitaly Klitschko fight, obviously now more than 2 decades ago. But that was this sort of horrendous, where even if the fighter wants to continue, we can't have anybody dying in the ring. I mean, it's gushing blood. So on February 25th, 1964, Cassius Clay defeated the seemingly invincible, undisputed world heavyweight champion. He'd had one title defense. He beat the crap out of Floyd Patterson in the first round. He had knocked Floyd out in the first round in the first fight. But Cassius Clay, despite the issue in the fifth round with not being able to see, defeated Sonny Liston. And his first title defense was 60 years ago today. So again, what wouldn't fly now is 14 months for a new champion who was he wasn't really polarizing yet, but he was a lightning rod for a lot of people. Really liked him. There were some people that said the kid going around telling everybody how good looking he is. You know, he's like a professional wrestler, Gorgeous George. That's where he got some of his shtick from, talking about how he was so pretty and, you know, I'm the greatest ever. Kid, you know, you're 22 years old. You haven't yet. You beat the champ, but you haven't done anything yet. Maybe you'll go out there the first time defending it. Maybe you'll get killed. Who knows? So he did a lot of talking. It made him popular. It made him a very early era star. And not just because he was champ. Like Joe Louis, for example. Most people, if you ask 100 boxing experts, for example, say, well, who are the 3 greatest heavyweights ever? Not necessarily best in their prime. Like who would win in a round robin or you know, some kind of a simulated tournament. But who is the best? Most experts will have Lewis and Ali in their top 3. Most, not all, but I would say 9 out of 10 is a fair assessment there. Lewis was an incredible fighter, but he wasn't really a controversial figure. He wasn't really that charismatic. He was just a guy who was really good at a weight that was a lot lighter than the guys of today. But Joe Louis at 200 could hit like hell from both sides, took a good shot, was somebody who he did take a lot of knockdowns, relatively speaking, but usually scrambled up and really it almost made him mad. He would beat the hell out of his opponent after that. But he wasn't that charismatic. And here you have this kid who is just kind of sitting on the title, but that's not what was supposed to happen. The guys were meant to have a return fight in the fall of 1964. And a couple of days before the rematch, which was not going to be in a tiny venue in Lewiston, Maine, it was going to be, I don't know if it was going to be in the Miami Beach Convention Center, but it was going to be at a big venue similar. The first fight was held in, I think, the Miami Beach Convention Center, but it was going to be in a real arena. It wasn't Madison Square Garden. That would have been the logical place. But the young champion, who, because he had changed his name, within a month or so, because he had been talking about it, but there were certain people who said, well, maybe he won't do it. Maybe he won't end up renouncing Christianity. Well, let's just see what happens. But he changed his name, and in certain segments of America, that immediately made him very unliked. And people who had supported him just from the sporting, but it doesn't have to be like a politician, but there were people who had considered themselves fans who suddenly said, well, fuck this kid. What the heck's he doing here? Why would he want to associate with Elijah Muhammad, Malcolm X? You know, when he was in the Olympics, he was talking about how great the country was. And yeah, we've got problems, but we're the best country in the world. Like he was kind of sticking to a party line or a company line there. And all of a sudden now he's gone haywire. I mean, he was raised in one faith. What's going on here? So that made him a little bit of a controversial figure. This is long before the issues with the Vietnam War. The United States had a presence in Vietnam at this point, but it wasn't at the level of escalation just yet to where there was going to be a draft and people were, oh my God, what's going to happen? My father was drafted in 64. He was drafted earlier in 64. And the escalation didn't take place until he had, I don't know, about 7 or 8 months left. I don't know the exact dates when the escalation took place. But the point is, he was somewhat unpopular simply because he changed his name. That pissed a lot of people off. And if it happened today, maybe by percentage less people would be mad, but there would still be people saying, oh, what the hell are you doing? So they were supposed to fight in late 64, and literally within 48 hours of fight night, Ali was in shape and he had trained. He looked tremendous. He was still 22. And he had dinner. I think it was, as I say, 2 nights before the fight. I don't know. Maybe it was the night before. I'm not 100% on this. This is something that I should know. But he suddenly seized up. There was something wrong with his stomach. And it turned out, of all things, he needed emergency hernia surgery. It wasn't like something with his stomach, like a flu or some horrendous superbug causing him to puke nonstop. He needed emergency surgery. And I think it was hernia surgery. Could it have been gallbladder? I think that I read that it was hernia surgery. But the point is, the fight had to be postponed. Now, if you believe in the idea that Sonny Liston, because he fought after the 2 fights with Clay and then Ali, He fought for a number of years more, and he was still really good. He was involved in that weird heavyweight bowl where they had almost, as I say, a round robin, but kind of a tournament to crown the new champion after Ali was unceremoniously, had his title stripped and he was thrown out of the sport. He thought he was going to go to prison for 5 years. And Liston was part of that. Liston lost a tough fight to a big fighter, a huge talent, Leotis Martin, who in a different era might have been a champ himself. He was really good. So Sonny could still fight in 1964. It's not like suddenly he was, I'm sure, past his prime. Nobody really knew how old he was. But he could still fight. And the idea was, maybe the first fight was a fluke. Maybe Sonny just didn't know what this kid could do. I don't know how that would be possible because they had all of the fight footage and he seemed like he was ready. He was talking about, I know the kid's going to be fast, but I'll be ready. Of course, the counterpoint to that is just seeing somebody on film. It doesn't mean you're going to have any idea what to do because all that movement doesn't look the same when he's standing in front of you and you can't hit him as it does on film. You say, well, when he does this, maybe I'll come over with the counter. But the odds makers still had Sonny as the favorite. So the general public and fight fans, not just whether people were making judgments on, well, do we like this kid now or not, but just as far as the fight goes, Sonny was a 6-5 favorite. But the fight had to be pushed back. There was talk, and some people sympathetic to Liston as far as biographers, they claim that if the fight had gone off in the fall of 64, they don't know who would have won. We're just taking a guess. But they're convinced that Sonny Liston would have fought a better fight. It's tough to imagine him ever beating Ali because Ali was getting bigger and presumably could eat bigger punches and not, drop like when he was a kid. When Henry Cooper knocked him down, the Ali, by the time 1964-65, he was 10 to 15 pounds bigger and didn't have a scrap of fat on him. That's how you eat bigger punches from guys. If you're 195 and a left hook that knocks you down, if you're 215, it might rattle you, but maybe you don't even take a backward step. And that's what's so critical when you talk about weight classes and, fighters of different weights competing against one another. It really does make an enormous difference. But with the fight pushed back, and then there was a lot of talk, which unfortunately ended up coming to pass, where there was a sense that the fight was not going to be on the level. There were people who thought there was something fishy in the first fight, that Sonny just looked so off that maybe he was paid to lose on purpose. I never believed that, because there are moments where Sonny is trying to rip the kid to the body. If you're trying to lose on purpose, you're not throwing body punches with the bad intentions that Sonny was throwing in the first fight. No chance. No chance. Because you might accidentally catch somebody in the liver. Oops, I'm sorry, he's on the ground for 30 seconds, fight's over. That didn't ever happen, but I don't think that the first fight was fixed. But going into the second fight, there was so much chatter that the arena in Lewiston was like only half full because there were people convinced this is going to be a fixed fight. Something stupid's going to happen. I don't want to waste money. This was really a thing that went on, now 60 years ago. So the idea, though, and this is kind of humorous looking back on it, there were people that were saying they got to Clay or Ali, because some people just called him Clay, and they weren't always doing it to troll him. You get used to calling someone something, or if you know a person personally, if you knew him as Cassius, you called him Cassius, unless he said, hey, can we, because he did that. And not everybody was Howard Cosell. Cosell began to call him Muhammad and Ali immediately. Like as soon as he changed his name, the next time he saw him, he didn't even ask. He just did it because that was how Cosell was wired. But it wasn't always antagonistic. It didn't always have to, turn into him losing his temper or like Ernie Terrell. It's different if somebody insisted on calling him Clay. Hey, bro, come on. Can you just say my name, please? Give me a little bit of respect here. Come on. So there was talk that maybe they got to the young champ and he's going to take a dive. Well, why would that happen? They said, well, Sonny's got the Vegas mob in his corner. Maybe they said, we're going to rub you out, or we're going to take a crack at your family or your brother or something like that. They said, that's ridiculous. He said, the champion has Elijah Muhammad in his corner. He's way more powerful, for better or worse at that point in time. He's way more powerful than than the Vegas mob. What are you kidding me? So there were actually people thinking maybe Ali will take a dive, or maybe he just won't put up much of an effort and Sonny will get the title back. And then there were those saying, no, that's fucking stupid. Sonny's going to go down. If anything, the mob's going to turn on him and they're going to tell him, you better take a dive. So there was a lot of chatter going into the fight that this fight was not going to be real. It was just going to be not on the level. And it's really as simple as that. So it's unfortunate historically that the people, the kind of doomsayers predicting this isn't going to be a real fight, to this day we don't know. We just speculate. But the one thing we know for sure, watching that footage, is that Muhammad Ali went out there with the idea, I'm going to take Sonny out early. I don't think he can compete with me anymore. He didn't look good. He doesn't say this, but the way that he fights, because the thing is, you go through Ali's early career and you even go into the 70s when he was tougher. He had the indomitable spirit and the will to win, but he wasn't as good. He always fought with a certain caution, unless his opponent really pissed him off, such as the Ernie Terrell fight. And he fought Patterson really mad. That was his first title defense after this Liston fight. But there were times where he was convinced his opponent could not hurt him. And he simply went out and began walking the guy down as if it was later in the fight. If you watch and it's only about 90 seconds, if you watch the footage, and there's a lot of really good footage of Ali Liston 2, May 25, 1965, on YouTube, and you see there is very little caution. Now, he's circling, he's on his toes, he's moving around, but he's not moving around looking to throw pitter-pat punches. He's moving around looking to leverage his shots. He's searching for angles where he can throw big shots, but Sonny is not at an angle where he can counter. And this is one of those things, again, something that wasn't necessarily taught to Ali, but he just seemed to know instinctively. And for such a young fighter, he had just turned 23. And here he is moving in such a way that he knows I can land a big right and there's no way that Sonny can get to me from the position that he is standing here. So he's loading up. And it's not something that he did, certainly not in that era. The only other fight where he was throwing right-hand leads early was the Foreman fight, but that was the strategy, as insane as it was, because George Foreman had an absolute steel chin. I got to try to take George out early. I can't dance for 15 rounds. He's not going to expect me to try to knock him out. Let's fucking go. He ended up winning the first round, but he knew that he also didn't have the stamina to dance around or to take the fight to George for 15. Good luck with that. Nobody could have done that. I would say not even Mike Tyson could sit there and stand and trade with George Foreman all night. Good luck. I mean, even Ron Lyle almost did it. But you watch the fight, which is only, 90, 100, 110 seconds, and it doesn't look like there's any way that Liston can even land a punch. He seems slower. And because of the disappointment, and Sonny legitimately was disappointed when the young champion took sick, and he didn't think there was any conspiracy because there were people saying, oh, this is bullshit. He legitimately, all that happened. That there were too many different people that said, no, he really got sick. There were people in the hotel with him, Howard Bingham, guys like that, his brother. He was in bad shape. He had to be rushed to the hospital. There wouldn't be any reason for that to be, fake, phony. But Liston was ready for that fight. And it's tough to gear yourself up again, 2, 3, 4 months later. It's easier said than done. And that's what a lot of people who were close to Sonny, his wife Geraldine, that's what they said. They said it's not that Sonny didn't train, but he was ready for that first one. He was ready for when the first rematch was supposed to take place, and he didn't get that sharpness back. Whereas the young champ, well, it's a lot easier to bounce back when you're 22 going on 23. And in the case of, Cassius Clay, now Muhammad Ali, I mean, he hadn't taken any bad beatings. You could say that Doug Jones hit him the most out of any of his opponents up to that point. And Doug was a tough fighter, but he probably was, would have been better as a light heavyweight. Maybe in later years he would have been a cruiser. The point is, it wasn't a big man loading up shots and laying them down the way that Sonny, for example, could do it. So there's not much to the fight. The champ is moving around the ring. Sonny is pursuing, and every so often, Ali stops moving and squares him up and lands some pretty serious shots. I mean, it looked like Sonny was wobbled a little bit from some of the early shots, and he's not landing anything. You know, you could theoretically hurt Ali to the body, but you've got to really leverage it, and you've got to have your feet planted and turn into the shot. That's something that Carl Mildenberger did in their fight in September of '66. That was one of the first times that Ali looked like a punch actually hurt. Not that he's shaken up, but that, you know, he's going to scream kind of thing, but he's tough, so he won't scream. But Mildenberger landed a body shot in like the 6th or 7th round, and he would have won the round, except I think he got knocked down just after that or before that. So I think the champ won all 10 rounds of that fight. 11, and it was stopped in the 12th. But the idea is that Sonny is on the receiving end. And here you have the referee, former champ, an all-time great fighter, another guy that was fighting probably above his best weight in Jersey Joe Walcott. I feel like Jersey Joe as a light heavyweight might have been, he and Ezra Charles might have been the greatest light heavyweights ever if they fought at 175 or below. But Joe Walcott, inexplicably, was the referee that night. Now, I mean, it's almost like stunt casting in a movie where you just, well, why are you doing this? So he's in the ring. And he had an idea what he was doing, but he wasn't Ruby Goldstein or Arthur McCanty Sr. or, you know, one of the other kind of famous officials of the day. Just ridiculous. So about a minute and a half, minute 40 goes by, and Sonny is pursuing, and the champion is along the ropes, and he leans back, and Sonny, kind of a rookie mistake, he lurches forward, the worst possible angle to do it, given the position of where his opponent is. And Ali leans back and comes in with this kind of corkscrew of a counter, which was later called an anchor punch. Like they were just making names up, but it's called historically the phantom punch because most people in the arena didn't see it. And if you watch the video of the fight, the main call, it's the same two announcers that did the first fight between the guys. It was kind of a closed circuit. I don't even know how that worked in 64 and 65 because I don't think this fight was broadcast on live television. And I don't think they called it closed circuit until later in the 60s. Closed circuit, the idea of that, similar to pay-per-view, you would pay, but it wouldn't be streamed into people's homes. It would be streamed into like arenas and stuff like that. Kind of like what they did with WrestleMania 2, where live matches were at one venue at a time, and then if you were at the other venues, you got to watch it on a big screen, like a simulcast, but it was called closed circuit. So the two announcers, Steve Ellis was the play-by-play, and the aforementioned Joe Louis was a color commentator. And Louis, although he had presumably a big bet on Sonny in the first fight, I don't know about the second fight, Louis was really impressed. And he and Ali had a kind of almost contentious friendship because each guy thought he was better than the other. What do you expect from, you know, born competitors like those two guys? But he loved Ali's talent. You know, you've never seen a kid with these kinds of skills, and he's so fast, but he'd say, oh, I would get him. I'd hurt him to the body. I could definitely beat him. Ah, come on, Joe. Don't call me a bum. There was a famous moment on TV where he seemed to intimate that, yeah, I would have just taken you out. You would have been part of the Bum of the Month Club. You would have been in the club. But it was like a kind of a funny back and forth between the two of them. But phantom punch, no one in the arena saw it, quote unquote, but the announcers saw it. So in the moment, the people in the stands are wondering what's going on because Sonny not only goes down, he goes down like he's been shot. And that's the thing, because the rumors of the fix, the idea was something to the effect of, if Sonny doesn't go down, he's going to get shot. So holy shit, he's on the canvas. Maybe somebody shot him. Because if you look at the reaction of the arena, they almost react in slow motion because they didn't see a punch. But Steve Ellis, from his perch, I don't know if he was like if he saw it, because I think he might have been behind and he saw Ali deliver the shot. He immediately says, right hand, Sonny is down. There was no equivocation, and he didn't say that didn't look like a loaded punch. That didn't look like a knockout punch potentially. He's simply calling it. He sees a quick shot, down goes Sonny, and he goes to the call. So that famous picture of Ali that everybody has seen, if you know who he is, you know the picture I'm talking about, where he's looking down at a fallen opponent with his arm like this, and either he's taunting or screaming, but he's doing something like that in the picture. When Sonny went down, because Ali had been told that something weird might happen tonight, just be ready. Now, they didn't want to tell him, maybe you'll get shot and you'll die, but that was at least something that had been discussed. So when Sonny went down, Ali knew he had landed a punch, but he also knew that Sonny was a huge guy that had traded leather with far bigger punchers than himself, and they had barely moved him. In that split second, as Sonny dropped, 23-year-old Muhammad Ali calculated, that's not right. There's no way that he's dropping from that punch. So he supposedly screamed, "No one will believe this." And when he was saying, "Get up," implying, there's no way that I hit you that hard, bro. No offense, but I know you. This is bullshit. So what he did is something that if it happened today, he would certainly get a point deduction. And the referee would say, "Kid, knock it off. Get to the fucking corner. I'm going to disqualify." Can you imagine doing that with Mills Lane? You do it again, you're gone. He bit his ear. He's out. Speaking of Tyson, I can see the bite marks. And then Mike goes, "Oh, it was a punch." Hey, bullshit. Mills was the best. But he didn't go to a neutral corner. And the lack of experience of Jersey Joe Walcott, because if that's a Ruby Goldstein in the ring, I think as soon as Ali starts swiping, Ruby grabs him and said, "Kid, you got 3 seconds to get to the corner. I'm taking a point away." And I believe he would have done it. But Walcott was so confused, he's almost following Ali around the ring. Bro, you're supposed to count over the fighter. Pick up the count from the timekeeper. What are you doing? Well, he had to get Ali away from Liston. So Walcott finally, after a number of seconds, manages to get Ali somewhere. He doesn't really get him all the way to the corner, somewhat to the corner, because in Ali's mind, this is a crock of shit. Get him up and let's have a fucking fight here. Because you see him almost going like that, riling himself up that he's going to deliver more big shots. So Sonny attempts to get up and then he falls over again. And that's when Steve Ellis, also not thinking that anything weird is happening, he goes, "Sonny can't move." In a moment, the lead announcer did not see anything strange. I saw a fighter get hit with a clean shot and he went down and it caught him on the point of the chin. And you never know what happens or what's going to happen when you see that. It doesn't always have to be a loaded punch. So finally, after at least 15 seconds, Sonny is back on his feet. And Walcott, he had never started the count. It's not because, for example, the famous long count fight in 27, the return match between, at the time, champion Gene Tunney and the former champ, one of the all-time greats in Jack Dempsey, Dempsey didn't go to the neutral corner. The ref didn't start the count on time. Tunney had at least an extra 4 seconds to climb up. Now, again, we don't know what would have happened if Dempsey had simply turned around and gone to the corner and the ref had started tolling, immediately. But in this instance, there was no count. Walcott didn't know what to do. He was like a deer in the headlights. This was a world heavyweight champ. He almost had Marciano beat until Marciano almost killed him. This was an all-time great fighter, and he's a ref. He doesn't know what to do. So he never starts the count. Sonny finally gets up, just as Joe presumably is going to start the count after 15 seconds, and he wipes off Sonny's gloves. You know how they do that. And he does one of these, and the fighters start to go at it, and Ali is just fucking killing Sonny. Looks like he's going to knock him down again. And Walcott, if you look at the tape, he sees somebody screaming at him, and he kind of goes like that, and he walks out of shot, and the two guys start trading punches, but it's mostly Ali landing, and Sonny's about to go anyway. And then Walcott comes back, separates the fighters, raises Ali's arm, fight's over. Now, where he went, the editor and publisher of Ring Magazine, and probably the most respected man in the entire sport of boxing, Nat Fleischer. When he wiped Sonny's gloves, Walcott that is, Nat Fleischer. Max Fleischer was a cartoonist. Nat Fleischer shouted, "Joe," urgently, like, "You got it. What are you doing?" And as Walcott moved towards Fleischer, Fleischer screamed, "Joe, the fight's over! The fight's over!" Meaning the guy was on the ground for like 15 to 20 seconds. You can't let this fight continue. So that's when Walcott comes back and declares the fight over. First round KO. And that is the only time in the history of any level of professional boxing or at the elite level where a knockout was scored without a count. That's one thing. And we'll see that if a guy is clearly unconscious. No count and no, like Walcott doesn't do one of these. As far as he's concerned, And I understand what he was thinking. I didn't administer a count. This fucking kid didn't go to the corner. The fight should continue. But Fleischer said, no, you can't do that. You have no idea how many seconds this guy was on the ground. You can't let this fight continue. It was legitimately a KO, and they weren't going to disqualify Ali for that. So that was it. And most of the people in the arena, 95%, did not see a punch. And they started screaming, fix. And this is still hotly debated to this day. What happened? And, you could even go on, if you were so inclined, you could go on and you could check out YouTube videos of people such as even Joe Rogan, we know is a big Ali guy, big boxing fan. He's had Mike Tyson on and other great fighters. He says that was a real punch. That was no phantom punch. But I feel like Sonny kind of overemphasized it. I think that he just didn't want to continue, either because he was threatened or he just didn't want to get embarrassed again. But he said, come on, he hit him hard, but he didn't hit him hard enough to end the fight. That was Joe Rogan's take, and he said that on a number of different occasions. It was a punch, but depending on who's telling the story, either it was a legitimate knockout, and Joe Walcott after the fight said, that was an incredible shot that the kid landed. That's one of the best shots I've ever seen. So from Walcott's perspective, he didn't think that there was any chicanery. He thought it was a legitimate knockout. Like, he didn't think that Liston was overacting the way he got to a knee and then fell back down. Almost, again, like in a Rocky movie, where you're reaching for the ropes and all that sort of stuff. He thought it was on the level. There have been people also, connected to Sonny who have said he was threatened. He was threatened. They said they were going to do something to his wife or kidnap her. And I mean, it might be as simple as that. Sonny, after the fight, acted as if he didn't know what happened. He said, well, Sonny, that punch must have really rattled you. And he said something like, yeah, I guess. So in the way that he recounted the story, he didn't really have much memory from the time he got hit. So we'll never know for 100% certain, what happened there, because there was no paper trail of money where you could definitively say, you couldn't definitively say that he took a dive, but you could definitively say such and such a person connected to Sonny made this kind of bet. And it's suspicious that a guy who was one of Sonny's best friends put in $1 million bet against him. There's nothing like that. It's just supposition and people using kind of logic to say, Sonny could take a big shot. I mean, George Foreman used him as a sparring partner after he won in the Olympics, in 1969, he won in 68. George said, I squared Sonny up a number of times and he usually just laughed at me. So George didn't say he thought that KO was not a real KO, but the implication was he could take a hell of a shot. It didn't look like kind of punch that should have even backed him up. And yeah, that's the end of the fight. So Ali went from there and he defended his title 8 consecutive times before unceremoniously being thrown out of the sport. And Sonny was not really a major contender again, even though he, as I mentioned, he was allowed into that kind of round robin tournament with the other big heavyweights of the era, including Ernie Terrell, Jimmy Ellis, and some of the other guys, and Leotis Martin, who beat Sonny in a fight that I think Sonny was winning, and Martin caught him and just fucking smashed him. I mean, it was a pretty brutal ending to the fight. And the last fight, and it's amazing how boxing can do this, the last fight of Sonny Liston's career was against a young fringe contender named Chuck Wepner, aka the inspiration for Sylvester Stallone's Rocky saga. On this day, 1965, the return fight between unbeaten, undisputed world heavyweight champion Muhammad Ali and the man he took the title from, the fearsome Charles Sonny Liston. This has been episode 521 of the Confessions of a Not So Dangerous Mind podcast. I'd like to thank you all so much for spending some of your Sunday afternoon with me here in New York. If you check out this episode on the YouTube channel, haven't done so already, please click like, subscribe, comment, share, turn on those notifications. Or if you catch this episode on the audio platforms such as Podbean, Spotify, iTunes, or the others in which we're hosted, same general rule applies. Click like, subscribe, share, and turn on those notifications. I'll be back with a new episode real soon. Till then,